Panchtantra tales. For more than 2.5 millennia, the Panchtantra tales have regaled children and adults alike with a moral at the end of every story. Some believe that they are as old as the Rig Veda. There is also another story about these fables. According to it, these are stories Shiva told his consort Parvati. The present series is based on the Sanskrit original. A king, worried that his 3 sons are without the wisdom to live in a world of wile and guile, asks a learned man called Vishnu Shaman to teach them the ways of the world. Since his wards are dimwits, Vishnu Shaman decides to pass on wisdom to them in the form of stories. In these stories, he makes animals speak like human beings. Panchtantra is a collection of attractively told stories about the 5 ways that help the human being succeed in life. Pancha means 5 and tantra means ways or strategies or principles. Addressed to the king's children, the stories are primarily about statecraft and are popular throughout the world. The 5 strategies are: 1. Discord among friends. 2. Gaining friends. 3. Of crows and owls. 4. Loss of gains. 5. Imprudence. The stories have been translated into nearly every language in the world that has a script. The story form appeals to children while the wisdom in them attracts adults. The Panchtantra collection represents the earliest folk tale form in the world of literature. There are several versions of Panchtantra tales in circulation in the world, but the one that is popular in India is the Sanskrit original of Vishnu Shaman. Very soon, Hamarashaha.com will bring to netizens the oldest collection of tales in the world as told by an 80-year-old teacher to his royal wards. The translation seeks to be as close to the Sanskrit original as possible in spirit. The stories will appear in 5 sections, each representing a strategy for getting over problems in life. They are of interest not just for the ruling class, but also for every person. They are all about survival in a complicated world and the several ways to get over problems. The stories based as they are on human nature have an eternal relevance. The series begins with a parent story that unfolds story after story, each strung to the other by a narrator. Now, it is your turn to enjoy these stories as immortal and fragrant as the soil of India. The loss of friends. Once upon a time, Amrasakti ruled the city-state of Mahilaropium in the south of India. He had 3 witless sons who became a matter of endless worry for him. Realizing that his sons had no interest in learning, the king summoned his ministers and said, "You know I am not happy with my sons. According to men of learning, an unborn son and a stillborn son are better than a son who is a dimwit. What good is a barren cow? A son who is stupid will bring dishonor to his father. How can I make them fit to be my successors? I turn to you for advice." One of the ministers suggested the name of Vishnu Shaman, a great scholar enjoying the respect of hundreds of his disciples. He is the most competent person to tutor your children. Entrust them to his care, and very soon you will see the change. The king summoned Vishnu Shaman and pleaded with him, "Oh, venerable scholar, take pity on me and please train my sons into great scholars, and I will make you the lord of 100 villages." Vishnu Shaman said, "Oh, king, listen to my pledge. 100 villages, do not tempt me to vend learning. Count 6 months from today. If I do not make your children great scholars, you can ask me to change my name." The king immediately called his sons and handed them to the care of the learned man. Shaman took them to his monastery, where he started teaching them the 5 strategies, Panchtantra. Keeping his word, he finished the task the king entrusted him in 6 months. Since then, Panchtantra became popular all over the world as children's guide in solving problems of life. Now begins the loss of friends, first of the 5 strategies series. These are stories that figure in a dialogue between 2 jackals named Karataka and Damanaka. Long, long ago, a merchant named Vardhaman lived in a town in the south of India. As he was resting on his bed one day, it struck him that money was the axis of the world, and that the more he had of it the more he would be powerful. Even enemies seek the friendship of a rich man, he told himself. The old become young if they have riches, and the young become old if they do not have wealth. Business is one of the 6 ways that help man amass wealth. This was his logic. Mobilizing all his wares, Vardhaman set out on an auspicious day for Madura in search of markets for his goods. He began his travel in a gala-decorated cart drawn by 2 bullocks. On the way, tired of the long haul, one of the bullocks named Sanjivaka collapsed in the middle of a jungle near river Jamuna. But the merchant continued his journey, asking some of his servants to take care of the animal. But the servants abandoned the bullock soon after their master had left. Joining him later, they told him that the bullock was dead. In fact, Sanjeevaka was not dead. Feeding on the abundant fresh and tender grass in the forest, he regained strength and began to merrily explore the jungle, dancing and singing in joy. In the same forest lived Pingalaka, the lion. Sanjeevaka, content with his new life in the jungle, would waltz and sing uproariously with joy. One day, Pingalaka and other animals were drinking water in the Jamuna when the lion heard the frightening bellow of the bullock. In panic, the lion withdrew into the forest and sat deeply lost in thought and surrounded by other animals. Sensing the predicament of their king, two jackals, Karataka and Damanaka, sons of two dismissed ministers, were clueless as to what had happened to their king. "What could have happened to the lord of the forest?" asked Damanaka. "Why should we poke our nose into affairs that are not our concern? Haven't you heard the story of the monkey, which pulled out the wedge from the log?" asked Damanaka. "Sounds interesting. Why don't you tell me what happened to the monkey?" pleaded Damanaka. "Now, listen," said Damanaka and began narrating the story of the monkey. 1. The monkey and the wedge. A merchant once started building a temple in the middle of his garden. Many masons and carpenters were working for the merchant. They took time off every day to go to the town for their lunch. One day, when the workers left for lunch, a batch of monkeys landed at the temple site and began playing with whatever caught their fancy. One of the monkeys saw a partly sawed log of wood and a wedge fixed in it so that it does not close up. Curious to know what it is, the monkey began furiously tugging at the wedge. At last the wedge came off, not before trapping the legs of the monkey into the rift of the log. Very soon, not able to get his legs out of the closed wood, the monkey died. Therefore, Karataka told Damanaka, "It is not wise to poke our nose into affairs that are not our concern. We have a food store. Why should we bother ourselves about this lion?" Damanaka retorted, "Food is not the center of our life. The elders have said that wise men seek the help of the king to help friends and harm foes. There are 100 ways of collecting food. What matters is a life full of learning, courage and wealth. If living somehow is the goal, even the crow lives long eating leftovers." True, but we are not ministers anymore. The elders have always said that the stupid person who offers uncalled for advice to the king invites not only insult, but also deceit, said Karataka. "No," Damanaka said, "anyone who serves the king with devotion is bound to earn his favor in the long run. The one who does not remains where he is. Those who understand why the king is angry or generous will one day rise in office. It is necessary to be in the good books of the king." "Okay, what do you want to do now?" asked Karataka. "You know the king is scared now. We will ask him what frightens him, and using the 6 ways of diplomacy get close to him." "How do you know the king is scared?" "Changes in posture, signs, pace, actions, conversation, looks and expression indicate the working of the mind. I will approach the fear-struck king today, and with my intelligence, I will dispel his fear and once again become his minister," said Damanaka. "How can you do it when you do not know principles of service?" asked Karataka. Damanaka told him all he knew and learnt about what makes a good and loyal servant in the service of the king. "In that case, I wish you all good luck," said Karataka. Taking leave of Karataka, Damanaka then called on the king. Recognizing that he was the son of his old minister, King Pingalaka told his sentry to bring him into his presence. Damanaka came down on his knees to pay respects to the king. "We haven't seen you for a long time," the king said. "I don't know of what use I can be to you, my lord. Yet, according to the learned, there are occasions when every person, however high or low, will be of use to the king. For generations we have served the king with devotion. Yet I am out of your majesty's favor." "All right, competent or incompetent, you are the son of our old minister. Go ahead and tell me whatever you have in your mind," the king ordered Damanaka. "May I ask you humbly, my lord, what made you come back from the lake without drinking water?" asked Damanaka reluctantly. "Oh Damanaka, haven't you heard the great and frightening sounds in the distance? I want to leave this forest. The strange animal that could make such sounds ought to be as powerful as the sounds he makes. Your Majesty, if it is only sound that is your problem, I wish to submit that sounds are misleading. I can tell you the story of the jackal, how it overcame the fear of sound. Let us hear it, said the king. 2. The Jackal and the Drum. A hungry jackal set out in search of food and ended up at an abandoned battlefield whence he heard loud and strange sounds. Scared, he thought, I must disappear from here before the man who is making these sounds gets me. After a while he told himself, I must not run away like that. Let me find out what really the sounds are and who is making them, because whether it is fear or happiness one must know its cause. Such a person will never regret his actions. So, let me first look for the source of these noises. Warily, the jackal marched in the direction of the sounds and found a drum there. It was this drum, which was sending the sounds whenever the branches of the tree above brushed against it. Relieved, the jackal began playing the drum and thought that there could be food inside it. The jackal entered the drum by piercing its side. He was disappointed to find no food in it. Yet he consoled himself, saying that he rid himself of the fear of sound. Therefore, Damanaka told King Pingalaka, Your Majesty should not be afraid of sounds. I seek your permission to go and see what the sounds are. Okay, said the king. Taking leave of the king, Damanaka proceeded in the direction of the sound. The king now began worrying himself about Damanaka's intentions. He may have a grudge against me for dismissing him once. Such persons seek revenge. I should not have taken him into confidence. Let me keep an eye on him. Wise men have always maintained that it is difficult to kill even a weak man, who does not easily trust others, but easy to kill a strong man, who readily trusts others, the king thought. As the king kept an eye on him, Damanaka moved slowly towards Sanjivaka, the bullock, and found that he was after all an animal and thought, this is a good omen. This will help me to get back into the good books of the king. Kings never follow the advice of their ministers unless they are in peril or grief. Just as a healthy man never thinks of a doctor, a strong and secure king also never remembers the need for a minister. Assured that what he saw was only a bullock, Damanaka returned to the king and told him what he saw. Is it true? The king asked. The king is God. The man who lies to a king perishes. He alone has the power to grant favors. I believe you. Great men do not harm weaker people. They take on only their equals. That is what is unique about brave people. What your majesty says is true. Sanjivaka is great. If your lordship permits me, I will persuade him to be one of your servants. All right, I am taking you back as a minister, said the king, pleased. Damanaka at once hurried back to Sanjivaka, and told him to stop bellowing and come and meet his king. But the bullock wanted who this Pingalaka was. What? You do not know our lord. Wait, you will know shortly the cost of this ignorance. There he is, surrounded by his retinue under the banyan tree. Sanjivaka thought his days were numbered and pleaded with Damanaka, Sir, you seem to be a man of great wisdom and wit. You alone can save me. I can come only if you can assure me that no harm will come to me. Damanaka told the bullock to wait for the right time to meet the king. Returning to the king, Damanaka told him, My lord, he is not an ordinary being. He is the vehicle of Lord Shiva. He told me that Lord Shiva had permitted him to feed on the tender grass in the neighborhood of Jamuna. But I told him that the forest belonged to our Lion King, who is the vehicle of Goddess Chandika. You are our guest. You can see our king and seek a separate space for you to graze. He agreed to this plan provided he has an assurance from your majesty. Yes, certainly. But I will need assurance from him in return. Bring him here, the king told Damanaka. Going back to the bullock, Damanaka advised him, You have the assurance of the king. But this new position should not go to your head. We have to work together. That is how we can prosper. Otherwise, he who does not respect everyone, however high or low, will forfeit the favor of kings like Dantala. What about Dantala? Asked Sanjivaka. 3. The fall and rise of a merchant. In the city of Vardhaman, there lived a wealthy merchant named Dantala. He held a great reception for his wedding attended by the king, the queen, their ministers, and all the rich and influential persons in the city. Present at the reception was Garamba, a lowly sweeper in the royal household. When Dantala saw him occupying a seat reserved for the nobles of the king, he ordered his servants to throw him out of his house. Thus insulted, Garamba thought to himself, I am a poor man, and so cannot give a fitting reply to such a wealthy person as Dantala. I must somehow see that the king stops his favors to him. Then he hit upon a plan to take revenge on Dantala. One early morning when the king was still in sleep, Garamba, pretending to sweep the king's bedroom, began loudly murmuring, "Oh, how arrogant is Dantala. He has the cheek to lock the queen in his embrace." Hearing this, the king demanded to know whether what Garam was murmuring is true. Did Dantala embrace the queen? "Oh, your majesty, I don't remember nor do I know what I was saying because I was drowsy having spent the entire night in gambling," the sweeper told the king. Not satisfied with his reply, the king thought that it was possible that the sweeper had seen Dantala, who had equal access to the royal household as Garamba, embracing the queen. He remembered wise men saying that men were likely to talk in their sleep about what they did, saw and desired in the day. Women were chaste because men were not within reach, or they were afraid of prying servants. Convinced that Dantala had indeed embraced the queen, the king barred Dantala from entering the royal household. The merchant began grieving his fate, though he had not done any harm to the king or his relatives even in his dreams. One day as Dantala was trying to enter the king's palace, he was barred by the king's men. Seeing this, Garamba told them, "You fools, you are barring the great Dantala, who has won the king's favors. He is powerful. If you stop him, you will meet with the same fate as I did at the hands of Dantala one day." The merchant thought that it would do him good to make Garamba happy and win his confidence. One evening he invited the sweeper for tea and presented him with expensive clothes and told him, "Friend, I had never meant to insult you. You had occupied a seat I had set apart for the learned. Kindly pardon me." Pleased, the sweeper promised to win the king's favor for Dantala again. The next day, Garamba repeated the same drama of pretending to talk irrelevantly, raving that the king was eating cucumber in the rest room. "What nonsense are you talking? Did you ever see me doing such things?" the king demanded to know. "No, your majesty. I do not know nor do I remember what I was saying because I was drowsy having spent the entire night in gambling," the sweeper said. The king then realized that if what the sweeper had said about him was not true, what he had said about Dantala also could not be true. A person like Dantala could not have done what Garamba had told him. The king also found that without Dantala the affairs of the state had suffered and civic administration had come to a standstill. The king immediately summoned the merchant to his palace and restored to him all the authority he had enjoyed before he fell out of king's favor. Damanaka resumed, "That is why we must know that pride goes before fall." Sanjivaka agreed. Taking him to the Lion King, Damanaka introduced Sanjivaka to Pingalaka. After exchanging pleasantries, the king asked him to relate his past and the purpose of staying in that jungle. On the bullock relating his story, the king said, "Friend, don't be afraid. I assure you that I will protect you from wild animals here, because even stronger animals feel insecure here." Since then, the king asked Karataka and Damanaka to look after the affairs of the state and began happily spending his time in the company of Sanjivaka. But the jackals were worried that after Sanjivaka had become a good friend of the king gave up his royal sports and pastime and became a saint. The jackal twins thought, "The king has stopped taking us into confidence after Sanjivaka became his best friend. He is also indifferent to his kingly duties. What shall we do now?" Karataka said, "The king may not heed our advice, but it is our duty to advise him on it if it is good for him. Elders have always held that even if the king is not willing to heed good advice, it is the duty of his ministers to offer him advice." "You are right," said Damanaka. "The mistake is mine. What happened to the sage and the jackal should not happen to us." Karataka then pleaded with him to tell the story of the sage and the jackal. "Jackal." Damanaka began telling him.